everybody, welcome. It is that time again. Matt Connarton Unleashed, and we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in glorious downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Also now on Comcast Channel 6 if you are in Manchester, watching on the cable. Also, of course, hello to all of our online listeners across the nation and around the globe. You can go to my website, mattconnerton.com, for all your live streaming options, social media links, contact info, show archives, etc., etc. Today is Tuesday, August 15, 2023. We have a guest coming up in just a couple of minutes. He's going to be calling in. He's had to reschedule a couple of times. Things come up, and he's a very, very busy guy. Award-winning journalist Bob Hennelly, but he's going to be calling in at 4:15. Really looking forward to speaking with him. He writes for many publications, and also he's a fellow radio host. He's on WBAI in New York City. Actually, let me make sure I get this right. What's the, is it 99.5? Oh, there it is. WBAI 99.5 FM. Yes, in New York City. So he's a real New Yorker. So I look forward to speaking with him. So he'll be joining us in just a couple of minutes. He has some experience here in New Hampshire too. I'll ask him about that. But Jenny had the privilege of being on Bob's program on WBAI a number of weeks ago, and he's gonna return the favor and join me here today. And really looking forward to speaking with him. Very fascinating guy. So I will not give out the studio line because he's going to be on the studio line he's going to give us about 30 minutes today. So that will be very cool. So looking forward to that, and we'll see what other kind of stuff we can get into today as well. I don't know. The news has been so slow lately. I don't know what we're going to talk about. Actually, yesterday was a pretty big day in the news, I reckon. So we will not take any calls on the studio line because we are expecting a guest. But of course, you can still text me at 617-917-4476. You're welcome to interact and opine in the Facebook live chat, and we will say hello to everybody in there in just a moment. And of course, you can email me, matt@mattconnerton.com. So I would love to hear from you, especially too, if you have any questions or anything for our guest, Bob Hennelly. You can put them in the chat room. You can email me. You can text me at 617-917-4476. So that will be coming up in just a couple of moments. But while we await Mr. Hennelly, we'll go ahead and say hello to everybody in the chat room. Jenny, of course, is in there and says shalom peeps. Also, Mike from Queen City Cabinetry joins us. Mike in Queen City Cabinetry, not only one of our great sponsors here at WMNH 95.3 FM, but I get to hang out with Mike every Friday night. He's one of our co-hosts on Retro Spectrum Radio with Paulie C. Fredo is in the chat room, or, I like to say his full name. Alfredo Enrique Benavides joins us and says, yo. Fredo, of course, from the bands Dank Sinatra and Cosmic Blossom. And Fredo's been on the show a number of times. JFed is in the Facebook live chat, of course, from the great state of Vermont. Says, good afternoon, everyone. Tom Blanchard says, hi, everyone. Melanie La Liberty, of course, from the great state of Vermont, also says, hey, guys. Tom Blanchard says, hipsters back in the 70s. I used to have a pair of low-rise jeans nicknamed hipsters. Let's see. We have a call. This might be our friend, our guest. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, is this Bob?
It certainly is.
All right, Bob Hennelly. It is wonderful to speak to you, sir. Welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. I've been looking forward to talking with you, and really appreciate too that you had Jenny on your show recently on WBAI. Very cool. And I was looking too at some of what you
very early in the morning. She was excellent.
Yeah. What time are you on the air? Is it 7 a.m.?
7 a.m. But we get up at 4 a.m. to make sure we get our facts right.
So you really got to be a morning person to do that. Good for you.
Or a late night person.
Right. Yeah. Just stay up super late and just keep going. Now, how long have you you've done radio at other places too, right? Weren't you on and WNYC? Is that correct?
Yeah, I was on WNYC, maybe like 15 years, and then I have been on Pacifica. I get fired by Pacifica every 10 years.
You do?
Yeah, I've been doing this a long time.
Now, why do you get fired from Radio Pacifica every 10 years? I have to know.
There's always a change of regime. There's always, if you've been in this business long enough, it's not personal. It's just business.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, we have a New Hampshire radio host who is on Radio Pacifica, I believe, or I think she still is. Arnie Arneson. You must know Arnie.
I love Arnie.
Yeah.
Yes, we've been we met during the pandemic. Now that starts like the beginning of a magical relationship. It's been great. I'm fortunate to know her, and she is really at this. She knows what's going on, and if you're not in the Rolodex, you're probably not going to be mounting much to New Hampshire politics.
Yeah, I first became aware of Arnie way back when she ran for governor. That was when she sort of became a household name to a lot of people around here, and
right.
And then, but I only met her for the first time maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, really interesting person. Great at what she does. I haven't checked out her show lately. I assume her radio show is still on. The Attitude.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
It's distributed through Pacifica, and it's on a couple hundred stations, and she does a great job. And she's got, like I say, just the who's who in New Hampshire politics, but she's been doing it long enough that she's really connected into the national conversation. So she's been really one of the few people who's got the attention of the national media, focusing on the craziness with what's going on with your primary, with sitting incumbent president not likely to be on the ballot, and creating an opportunity for Robert Kennedy Jr. to have kind of like his Gene McCarthy moment, if you're old enough to remember what that was.
Oh God, yeah. RFK. Yeah, I've been very worried about the New Hampshire primary. I want to, because the DNC, of course, wanting the first primary to be in South Carolina, and I understand. I mean, Joe Biden owes his entire presidency to South Carolina, in my opinion, and Senator Jim Clyburn. But I always say, to paraphrase something that, Charlton Heston said, you'll have to pry the New Hampshire primary from my cold dead hands. But I can, well, it's, every 4 years, once every 4 years, there's a span of time where the rest of the country actually is concerned with New Hampshire. So it's nice. But,
well, and I do think, though, that you have to be, the folks in the Beltway, the big problem they've demonstrated is the inability to be nimble. And so while theoretically I understand the arguments about diversity and providing the opportunity to South Carolina and a more diverse polity to have that first opportunity, but then there's reality and the facts on the ground. And so what's happening now is that New Hampshire is providing a wonderful opportunity for the Republican Party to dominate the national conversation, and for the Democratic Party to be kind of eclipsed. And I think that's a mistake, because I'm sure that there are issues in New Hampshire that need the president's attention. I was just looking up before he came on the problem that you've got, which is happening all over the country, where we are now with the pandemic supposedly over. What's the euphemism in the byway? Unwinding Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I just had this happen the other day, I went to get a blood test and was getting my blood drawn at a Quest, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and the wonderful young woman there, a single mother of two, was a Quest technician, and she told me she'd just been thrown off her health care.
Yeah.
So there you have the American tableau of the 21st century, being in the front line, an essential worker, taking someone else's blood without health care.
Yeah, it's awful. And obviously, too, now I have not yet had a chance to read your book, but I'm very interested in it. You've written a book, Stuck Nation. Can the United States change course on our history of choosing profits over people? And so this is obviously an issue that you're very steeped in and knowledgeable about. And it took me a long time to get there, but I support Medicare for all, some form of socialized medicine. I consider myself a capitalist, but so, like I said, it took me a while to finally arrive at the conclusion.
That's not irreconcilable. I think that if you want to maximize the economic opportunity in the United States, you want to have all the workers healthy and present and accountable, ready for exploitation. And what better way to do that than have them be healthy?
Exactly. I wouldn't have put it quite that way, although I would have put it very close to that way, Bob. So yes, I agree. Absolutely. A healthier country would ultimately be a more profitable country and more, more efficient and all of it. But
Well, and here's the other thing too. I would make an argument to you that one of the sad things is that as long as we have this 19th century idea of that your health care is linked to, actually it's like, I guess, post World War II, the idea of linking your health care coverage to your job is, in light of the nature of how employment has changed and the social contract of work has changed, it gives entirely too much leverage to the bosses, and also guarantees that Americans will never see another raise that's greater than inflation as long as they have to pay for their health care out of their employment relationship.
Right.
And so the other thing it's done is this scarcity mindset about real-time delivery. I think that's probably appropriate for all kinds of things in the economy, making cars, you name it. But when you do that for healthcare and you create it as a luxury good or a scarcity item, you then create a situation where a significant part of the population is more vulnerable to disease. Not to get too New Testament-y on you, but gated communities cannot stop you from a virulent, infectious pandemic.
Right.
And so what we had with the COVID experience was 4% of the world's population, and 12% of the death toll from COVID. And we pay more than any other OECD country that is similarly situated in terms of the status of the economy, with the poorest outcome.
Yeah.
And so that meant that the fact that so many Americans were undercovered exposed the entire population to the greater likelihood of being infected. And so that's why I say to you, you can be a capitalist and in favor of universal health care to guarantee, think of it as a civil defense measure, that everybody that you interact with at least has basic health care. That makes you safer as a cold-blooded capitalist to pursue those profits to your heart's desire.
Yeah, even my father, who's pretty conservative, more so as he's gotten older, I would say. I don't think he'll mind me saying that, but he even supports socialized medicine. He's all for it, and like myself, it took him a while to get there too, by his own admission. But he's all for it as well. Now, Bob, too. Not to pivot, but. I have to ask you, and Jenny is reminding me. Jenny said in the chat room, ask him about Jesse Jackson. And Jenny told me you've got some great stories, and this is a connection that you have to the state of New Hampshire, where I am, correct?
Yeah, it was in my lost youth in 1984. I was going to college at Ramapo College, which is was a public college that was started by let's euphemistically call them progressives, but these were, and so there was a professor of sociology there, Professor Sam Penn, and this was in northern New Jersey, and he was actually in his, he was from New York City, he was from Brooklyn, and he was very much part of the Black United Front and Reverend Daughtry, which was a pretty far left organization. Funny enough, funny how times change. It was kind of the same milieu that our current Mayor Adams came out of.
Okay.
Before, so anyway, I got a call from Professor Penn, and he said the Jesse Jackson campaign has landed in New Hampshire, and they're realizing that there's not any kind of real African-American base to build a campaign organization on. So they asked if I would come up with some of my other hippy-dippy friends from Ramapo College, and so we came up there and did a little bit of an audition, and then ended up doing advanced work for Jesse Jackson in 1984, and it was indeed a once-in-a-life experience. And it was I think what was fortunate for us, and I didn't know that, was that there was we were benefiting from the fact that in that primary season there was a tremendous residual resentment of Walter Mondale because there were so many folks up there that were disappointed in the Democratic Party that Ted Kennedy did not win the presidential nomination, and it was bested by Mr. Carter. And so we had all kinds of help that, of course, was anonymous from the folks that wanted Jesse to do well. And, of course, we know what happened there. He had this kind of ancient history, but he had gotten the Air Force flyer out of Syria. The campaign was flying pretty high, and then he had that whole incident where he was involved with mentioning, articulating, calling New York Hymietown, and then the campaign pretty much died from there on. But it gave me some real insight into operating in the political environment in New Hampshire, which is just really very unique. And I understand why this is a habit the American people just can't shake every 4 years.
Yes. Now, was there an experience, though, a negative experience where was there a brick thrown through a window or something? Jenny had said.
No. Yes, she is. Man, she's got a great memory, and of course, I will have her on my program to seek my revenge on New York Drive Time. So we had managed to get a storefront in Manchester and starting up the campaign, and what ended up happening was right after the opening festivities, somebody shot out a plate glass window, and I was there when it happened, and so there was a parking garage across the street where evidently it had come to the window, and I remember in my crazy 20s racing up into that parking garage, and then it occurred to me, what would I do if I caught the person?
Yeah.
But it was, it was also, I do remember dealing with, I really enjoyed the diversity of the politics there, and the as much as folks say that it's a state that is not diverse, I found that there was this political philosophies were all over the map, but people did have this passion about it, right?
Yes.
And so that was something that was really engaging, and there was some very curious conversations because a large part of I had to work with the Secret Service, and so a lot of the folks that we were drawing to the Jackson campaign were part of the Clamshell Alliance and people that had been arrested, of course, fighting nuclear power. And so there were some very tense conversations with the Secret Service, so these are the people that have to be with the candidate.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So that's why I always found it, I have to tell you that my direct experience working with the Secret Service in 1984, that was what was running through my mind as a reporter covering January 6th. And I know that one of the aspects of this entire tribulation we've been through, the ongoing insurrection, has been the lack of disclosure about what the Secret Service knew and when they knew it. And it's still kind of like an unresolved aspect of this. But I can tell you that the state of play in 1984, they knew everything that was going on in that campaign.
Oh, I bet.
And so I still think we need to have some accountability about that. Because, in this last insurrection thing, they lost all the text messages. Remember that?
I do. Although I'd forgotten until you brought it up because there's so much to keep track of with all of it. I'd actually forgotten about that specific aspect. Yes, the mysteriously vanishing text messages that no one can seem to find. Yes.
Well, what I'm concerned about is actually I don't see the insurrection as a discrete moment that's over with. And so when I'm reporting on this, I see it as more like we're a Caribbean island nation where it's still not resolved, where they have possession of the Supreme Court, they have one house of the legislature. I'm following, for instance, I pay a lot of attention to the continuing funding for 9/11 World Trade Center health program, which is a very important program for so many first responders and folks that do the kind of work that Jen does, when she was working as an EMT. And there's a funding authorization that's critical to keep that program functioning, which is going to get caught up in what looks to be the hijinks when the Republicans return to the House in the fall, and there's a fairly good chance they'll shut down the government. So I'm following very closely. So to me, that kind of instability in the government is signs to me that this insurrection is not resolved.
Interesting. You mentioned covering the insurrection. Were you there? Were you in Washington D.C. when that on
No,
January 6th?
I was writing for the Chief Leader newspaper, which is a civil service paper that covers New York City, and I was actually kind of amazed because we had retired civil servants who had, in some cases, significant pensions that were putting at risk to be part of that activity.
Yeah.
And so I sat in on a number of calls where this was when they, of course, were arraigning people in conference calls because we were still in the midst of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about, you also mentioned, of course, 9/11. Were you, I assume you were in New York when that happened?
So it's funny, I was working for Pacifica as a national affairs correspondent and had just, to give you a sense of the lay of the land, there's 5 stations that are part of the Pacifica network, BAI being the New York station. And that was on 120 Wall Street, which is all the way over on the East River.
Okay.
And, of course, the World Trade Center abuts the Hudson River. And so I had just had an ISDN line put into my house so that I could do the national feed without going in.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of me using that remote ability. So I was not there then. But then, of course, like everybody else, for several months, the cleanup went on for 7 months, well into May. And the fires actually burned until St. Patrick's Day. That was really and also, of course, the thing I don't think most people are aware of is that we have now lost more people from the occupational exposure that day and the 7 months afterwards, because, of course, one of the things that happened was that the Environmental Protection Agency, under the leadership of Christine Ty Woodman, the former governor of New Jersey, said that the air was safe to breathe. Oh. And a subsequent report by the Inspector General of the EPA found out that the Bush White House had intervened and that considerations about opening up Wall Street and continuity of business trumped concerns about occupational and public health, and that, in essence, the EPA mischaracterized and concealed and suppressed information that showed that the readings in the air were of considerable concern, particularly to the people that were working on the file. And as a result, and I track this every day, we lost 343 firefighters on the day of the attack, and we're going to come close to that number of people that have died since from the exposures they had that day and for the several months afterwards. The general population, I would say it's close to 3,000 to 4,000 have died. So we're well past the number of people that perished on that day. And that rooted back into the fact that it was considered more of a priority for the continuity of business than the people we made aware of the attendant risk was staying down there.
Wow. Yeah. And it's so infuriating, too, watching these people have to fight for just to get the care that they need. And then, of course, now the number of people who've passed, it's just, that is staggering. Jon Stewart, of course, it's great that, somebody like him who's got such a high profile has been able to do a lot of great advocacy very publicly for these people. But it should never be first of all, it's interesting what you point out about how everything was opened back up without any consideration for, whether these people were being poisoned, which obviously they were. And I didn't know the part about actually there's a lot of details in that I didn't realize, Bob. So that's interesting, but it's also infuriating, obviously.
Well, one of the things is that we have been successful in extending the Zadroga Act, which is named for James Zadroga, who was a detective with the NYPD. And so to give you a sense of how resistant, and this is not uncommon, anyone who follows Veterans Affairs knows that the government is so resistant to whether it be burn pits in the 21st century or Agent Orange. The government is just loath to admit liability, right? And so the same thing was true here. And so for a few years after 9/11, the city of New York resisted disclosing or even owning up to the occupational risk, and so it was actually James Zadroga who was ill and was disabled, and luckily he was taken to a New Jersey coroner who actually made an independent determination outside of New York City that it was indeed his exposure to the 9/11, all the glass, asbestos, it had really riddled his lungs. And that was the first situation where 9/11 related health exposure was formally fingered for death. And even right up until that, the mayor of New York City at the time, Michael Bloomberg, insisted that Zadroga died because he was a drug addict.
No kidding.
And, oh yeah, and so everything was about making sure the city indemnified itself or avoided liability. And then, of course, to Mayor Bloomberg's credit, he did apologize to the family.
Oh,
but before Jimmy died, the NYPD had him under surveillance, and we're hoping to catch him like some episode of one of those national crime dramas. And so that has been kind of like we've seen, for instance, there's about 20,000 children who were at the time K through 12 who were ordered back into dozens of schools in Lower Manhattan and Western Brooklyn that were subsequently determined to be in the hot zone.
Oh, wow.
That have a significant elevated level of risk related to all kinds of diseases, which is why the Zadroga Act was expanded to 2090. Now we just have to make sure it's funded.
Wow. Oh my God. Wow. That's incredible. That's crazy. I have to ask you too. I'm curious. Is it strange, because obviously at that time when 9/11 happened, really just by luck of him having to have been mayor at the time, Rudy Giuliani, it really elevated his status, and he sort of, obviously he was already he had been a well-respected U.S. prosecutor and so forth, but and then he was mayor, and I don't know how he was doing before 9/11, but once 9/11 happened, and he, I guess he projected a certain optimism and so forth through that terrible day and the aftermath of it. But now he's being indicted in Georgia. I mean, as a New Yorker, is that just just weird?
Because I covered him closely.
Yeah,
I have to tell you that image of him was always a false front, and so when he ran for president, it's instructive to remember that widows of firefighters from 9/11 dogged his campaign, because firefighters, and you check I've written extensively about this, the fire union have always maintained that it was the failure of Giuliani's administration to provide proper fire radios that led to the death of at least 100 some odd firefighters who were caught up in the collapse of one of the towers and didn't get the order to leave.
Okay.
And so people always have found it, who know New York City intimately and know the public unions, find it ironic that the nation, to a large degree, that image of Giuliani is a consequence that when he was U.S. attorney, he was very much of a publicity machine and really cultivated the media. And in my business, when somebody who, like a U.S. attorney, cultivates you, then that becomes, you're invested in helping them. When they just, they become somebody that you want to reinvest in their image. And then it becomes like you're involved with Rudy Inc. And so you just have to look at the people that he surrounded himself with. Bernie Carrick, who is a police commissioner and then ended up getting caught up and heard on a New Jersey State Police wire, and then found himself convicted for a whole bunch of corrupt deeds before even Donald Trump was involved as a figure in our politics.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess that's the thing, is how well you know New York City. Yes, you're right, at 10,000 feet, and the national image is that he was America's mayor.
Right.
But he was somebody that was very divisive and was very skilled at playing off using racial dynamics as a way of running the city. And that's one of these things, the difference between his public persona and what it was like if you were aware of how he actually governed day in, day out. There's a dramatic difference. In fact, even right now, there is a renewed congressional interest in the city of New York releasing the files that Giuliani had when he was mayor. And the current mayor, who is nominally a Democrat, is refusing to release the 9/11 municipal files unless there's further indemnification of the city of New York.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Didn't hear about that on the news, did you?
Did not. I did not. I had no idea. I do know that Mayor Eric Adams is, a lot of people are not necessarily thrilled with him. But
he's got a tough job.
Yeah, no doubt. So looking at Giuliani now, having covered him and knowing the truth of him and seeing that up close, are you not shocked at what's happening to him now, or is there a part of you that kind of always thought, it makes sense that it ends up this way for him?
So I have this. I cover New Jersey politics, and so Donald Trump was on my radar from his days in Atlantic City.
Yeah. And
so I've interviewed Donald Trump, and I really, it's Atlantic City, the state of New Jersey owes a tremendous apology to the United States because it was in Atlantic City that Trump really developed this ability to corrupt everything and anything that he is engaged with. And the state of New Jersey, which so badly wanted gambling to work out, aided and abetted him in his criminality. And he would collect regulators, prosecutors, law enforcement figures like you might collect butterflies in a cigar box.
Wow.
And once you finished your turn on the Regulatory Control Commission, why, then you, my friend, would have an opportunity to work with Donald Trump. Even Governor Jim Florio, who I had great respect for, just recently passed, he was on one of Donald Trump's board. That's right. This is the way he works. And so I am not surprised. And, of course, being in New York City real estate, knowing the way that functions as a business, which is, it's got nothing, the Wild West has nothing on New York City real estate. Hi, got a problem with tenants in the building? Get some people with baseball bats who know the Hells Angels and throw them out. I mean, that's, it's told to be some kind of like progressive place.
Yeah.
But the actual economy on the ground is a brutal place. I mean, New York City's personality, that New York City was actually, the mayor during the Civil War wanted to side with the South. I don't know if you're aware of that, but New York City was really upset that the Union was lining up to stop slavery because they were actually closer politically to the economy of the Cotton South. And so, New York is, and by association, Atlantic City has this mercantile spirit. There are no enduring family values there. It's all just about the money.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not know that about New York siding or wanting to side with the South in the Civil War. Jeez, wow, that's shocking. I have to ask you too.
I wasn't there to cover that, but
right. Understood. I should ask you too, Bob, about because you obviously New Jersey very well. Any thoughts on Governor Chris Christie, who, by the way, I don't know if some of my listeners might know this, but he is now pulled ahead of Ron DeSantis in the polls here in New Hampshire. Not that it's going to matter. Trump will win, I have no doubt. But do you have any insight on the governor?
Yeah, it's like, so it's so funny because Chris Christie and I go back a long way. We lived in the same part of Morris County, New Jersey. I covered him when I was stringing for the New York Times, when he was a U.S. attorney. I remember at his press conference, he was selected by Bush to be the U.S. attorney. He had not had any real background in that kind of heavy lift. he was known as a Bush pioneer, which means you've given more money than anyone else. And so, of course, you got to be U.S. attorney. And I remember that I asked him at the press conference if that's why he got the job. That's how I was rolling back at that time.
Did he? Did he answer? Did he answer your question when you asked him that?
Yeah, he gave an answer. He's great copy. I will tell you that I did have. I covered him. Then I was at WNYC, and he, of course, got elected. When he served as U.S. attorney, he did go after both political parties in terms of political corruption.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember I was part of the national media pool that had to cover him on Sandy, and I remember I was living in a rural part of Morris County, and it was really tore up really badly by Sandy, and I had the sad duty to report the first fatalities for Sandy in that part of Morris County. And then I got a call from the state police executive protection unit that they wanted me to drive down the next day to the state police headquarters, and then to take a Black Hawk helicopter and then be responsible for providing the sound of Governor Christie's first inspection of a community called Sayreville.
Okay.
Which is, a blue-collar kind of place. It's bungalow houses that used to be seasonal that people had fixed up to year-round housing. People with not a lot, certainly working-class neighborhood. And I have to tell you that I was very moved by his engagement with these people.
Really?
I've certainly been very critical of Bridgegate and all the rest, but in that singular moment and those hours that I was covering him, I was quite impressed with his ability to engage people in a way who had really lost everything.
Yeah.
And to give them a sense that they were part of something bigger than themselves that would help them and protect them. That is the kind of thing that unless you experience directly. I mean, I will never forget when I'd never been in a Black Hawk helicopter before, and clearly they preserve all of the payload for the lead that protects you if you're a soldier.
Sure.
But when I got out of there, I've never heard I'd never heard the sound of 200 women crying collectively.
Wow.
And that's something you don't forget. I mean, colleagues of mine who've worked in war-torn areas or mass disasters, that's described that. But he acquitted himself that day, and of course, subsequently, in a significant way, with, of course, embracing President Obama. So,
you know, it's funny. People talk about the hug with Obama, and people talked about it so much over the years that it sort of created a Mandela effect, at least that I experienced. I have an actual mental image of that hug, even though they never actually did embrace. They just shook hands. Right. But in my mind, I got so used to hearing Republicans complain about the hug that in my mind, I had created a mental image of it, even though it never happened. By the way, just quickly, Bridgegate, do you believe he knew? Because I think he knew. I've never believed him on that.
There was an atmosphere, and this is an occupational hazard for a business that runs on your ego, right?
Yeah.
And so what is the problem here is that he had created this atmosphere where his subordinates felt that they had to get results by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I just can't forgive is that this was happening. Remember, this played out on the anniversary of 9/11.
Right.
On the Port Authority's George Washington Bridge,
mm-hmm.
which, if you know anything about counterterrorism, has always been one of the major targets that law enforcement and national security has worried about. So this was actually the most egregious thing, which the U.S. Attorney should have charged, which is that the Port Authority Police, an arm of a bi-state agency, was used for a political grudge. Yeah. And their eyes were taken off the ball of their fundamental job to protect and serve people from a terrorist attack. That's what's wrong with Bridgegate. I bet you haven't heard that analysis either.
No, that's a fantastic point, and that had not occurred to me. I mean, I know that obviously it caused problems. I believe someone died, if I'm not mistaken, because an ambulance.
No, they didn't die, but it slowed the response.
Okay.
And so it was slow to an ambulance response, and it did create, and it was never addressed within. One of the things that happened, the Bergen Record did great reporting on this, is what happened was the superior officers of the Port Authority Police, when regular rank and file cops were like, hey, we can't have these pylons here. This is going to make a mess. They got visited by the brass who told them to stop talking on the radio.
Oh.
And the PBA that backed Christie were like totally politically compromised in around this, because what was happening was there was a tremendous, after 9/11, the city of New York wanted to take over the security function for that 16-acre area of the Port Authority that has the World Trade Center. It's important to understand that the Port Authority is actually a separate government. I try to tell people it's like the Vatican. It's a duchy.
Oh, interesting.
So it is a separate sovereign entity. And so Christie sided with, in order to get the endorsement of the PBA, sided with them in this internal battle. And so the PBA became a tool for that. And so one of the other things that happened is there were a number of unindicted co-conspirators in Bridgegate that were brought up, and we never learned the identity of any of those people. And, of course, subsequently, the three people that were convicted had their convictions, well, two of them had their convictions overturned by the Supreme Court, which is just lately gotten very weak-kneed about public corruption. You really just have to, any kind of public corruption case, their inclination, I guess they felt guilty about Thomas. They feel, well, if he's not being held accountable, we should let them all go.
I didn't realize that two of those had been overturned. Oh, that's incredible. That's incredible. Well, Bob,
I think I got to jump, but it was great talking with you, and I hope we can catch up again soon.
Absolutely. Do you want to plug anything quickly before you go?
No, I guess my work shows up in DC Reports. It would be great to come back sometime and talk about the battle of New York City retirees to resist Medicare Advantage, because that's a whole other thing. That's how I met Jen, is this great event in Washington where, around the country, civil servants, retired civil servants who've done so much to build the country and protect and service, now find themselves being auto-enrolled out of access to traditional Medicare in exchange for these fly-by-night snake oil salesmen that are promising you titanium sneakers and a 24-karat gold walker. All you have to do is call 1-800 do we cheat him and how?
I know, it's maddening. All right, Bob Hennelly, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for joining us, my friend. I do look forward to doing this again in the future, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye. All right, that was Bob Hennelly, and you can hear him, by the way, too. He's also a fellow radio guy, WBAI 99.5 in New York City. He's a real New Yorker. And really enjoyed talking with him, and I learned a lot too. So that was very cool. We've got a few minutes before the top of the hour, so if anyone wants to get in with a call, the studio line is open, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617-917-4476. I'm on social media at Matt Connarton. You can email me, matt@mattconnerton.com. And, of course, you can interact and opine in the Facebook live chat. But the best thing to do so that we can hear and enjoy your dulcet tones is to give us a call at 603-250-6007. We'll get into, in the second hour, we'll certainly get into big news day yesterday. But let's see who else has joined us in the Facebook live chat. John Hopwood is in the chat room. Hello, John. And he might be the only one who's popped in there. Jenny shared some links too for on Bob Hennelly's behalf in the chat room. Oh, Miriam Banish joins us and says, "Good afternoon." Good afternoon, Miriam. All right, very good. Oh, Rhonda Favero from the great state of California, also in the Facebook live chat. Hello, Rhonda. I thought I saw somebody else who had popped in there. Very good, very good. Well, I think what we'll do is we are close to the top of the hour. We'll play a song, and then we'll come back, and we'll kind of reset. We'll show some love to our amazing sponsors, all of that. And then we do have much to discuss, my friends. So there's plenty more Matt Connarton Unleashed to come, but thank you again to Bob Hennelly for joining us. And we'll play a little Eons Encoded. This song always gets a great response whenever I play it. And then we'll be back with hour number 2, Numero Dos, coming up. Don't go anywhere. everybody. Here we go. Hour number 2, numero dos of Matt Connarton Unleashed. And we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in glorious, although a bit rainy and damp, but glorious downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Also now on Channel 6 on Comcast here in Manchester. And of course, hello to all of our online listeners across the nation and around the globe. You can go to my website, mattconnerton.com, for all of your live streaming options, social media links, contact info, show archives, etc., etc. Today is Tuesday, August 15, 2023. So nice to have you with me. And thank you again to Bob Hennelly for joining us in the first hour. I really enjoyed speaking with him. He's a very accomplished and award-winning journalist, and he's also a fellow radio host. He's on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York City. And Jenny has had the privilege of being on one of his shows a few weeks ago. They had a great discussion. So it was great to get to talk with Bob. And he did say, and we're going to hold him to it, he did say he'll be back in the future. So I really enjoyed talking with him. I could have talked to him for the whole show, but he had limited time because he is a very, very busy guy. But I do have time for you if you would like to call us at 603-250-6007. The studio line is open, 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617-917-4476. I'm on social media at Matt Connarton. You can email me, matt@mattconnerton.com. And of course, you can interact and opine in the Facebook live chat, if you please. But the best way to reach us so that we can hear and enjoy your dulcet tones is to give us a call at 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. Let's see. Well, obviously, I mean, there's no escaping it. And I know that last week I avoided all the Trump legal stuff because I was suffering from, if you didn't get a chance to tune in last week, you might not know, I've had a terrible ailment. I had some of that TFS going, Trump fatigue syndrome, but huge news yesterday, which is unavoidable. But we do have a call, so we'll take this. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
Oh, you asked for it.
Oh, it's Dave Ridley. What's up, Dave?
And what's worse, I'm going to talk about Dave Ridley.
You're going to talk about yourself?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you know,
Is that allowed? Is that allowed?
You can talk about yourself. Are you? Do you have some sort of announcement? Are you? Have you won some sort of an award? Are you about to go on a trip? Well, what could it be?
No, I wouldn't talk about myself if it wasn't a little bit newsworthy.
Oh.
No, I am reactivating the Ridley Report as of yesterday.
I didn't know the Ridley Report had been deactivated.
Yes, I went about a year and a half without producing anything. You know, there's hardly anywhere to put it. You know, I've been when I got deplatformed from YouTube. You know, I was getting, you know, well, I guess at my peak I was getting about 4,000 hits per video. Over time, they gradually, you know, cut pieces of me off until I wasn't getting very many hits. And then they said, well, if you put up any more videos and we don't like them, we'll just take your channel down.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't quite that simple, but that's the basics.
No, I understand. I mean, I've had my own tribulations with YouTube, so I understand, but not nearly to the extent that you have, obviously. So how long ago was that? So that was when you decided to suspend the Ridley Report, right? So how long ago was that, Dave?
About 18 months ago.
Okay, so a year and a half. So now you are restarting it on YouTube?
No, I did try to make a new YouTube channel, but it got no hits. Basically, the old YouTube channel, again, if I would put up a video, they would sometimes look at the video, or, you know, their robot would look at the video and threaten to take down the whole channel. Because there's all these things apparently you're not allowed to say anymore, and I can't keep track of them all, and I don't know why the video gets taken down or why I get threatened exactly. But they, you know, it's like, you know, anyone that has a YouTube account knows how this works, and anyone that tries to watch YouTube knows how hard it is to watch without special software now.
Wait, what?
Well, you know how, you know, it's always putting ads up in front of you and interrupting your video and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you have an ad blocker or whatnot, there are ways to get around it. But.
Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And it is frustrating when they don't, and, you know, Facebook is like this too. it's frustrating when they tell you, you've broken the rules in some way, but they won't tell you exactly what the rule is that you broke. So then you have to guess. And then it becomes a matter of, well, it's a little difficult to know what not to do if you're not going to tell me what I did that was wrong. So I understand that frustration too. So are you restarting the Ridley Report on another platform?
Well, it's been running on. I've been uploading whatever I shoot to BitChute basically, and there have been a couple of exceptions. Over the last 2 years, there's been occasions where I've shot something and uploaded it, but basically I've just kind of thrown my hands up. But people kept requesting that I get it going again and get out there, and the whole idea is to go to government meetings, stand in front of the government meeting, ask government bureaucrats questions, and establish the right to film the meeting. That kind of thing. It usually triggers often triggers some drama and hopefully makes civics interesting in an area where, especially, local politics just is undercovered by the mainstream press now.
Scott Robinson in the chat is asking a question about PorcFest. You don't actually participate in PorcFest, do you, Dave?
Yeah, I go sometimes. I go about every 5 years.
Oh, did you go this year?
No, I went in 2021 was the most recent one.
Scott Robinson's asking something about people walking around nude and doing drugs around kids. I haven't heard anything about that. Do you know anything about that?
So PorcFest is a big tent. So you've got evangelical Christians there, Satanists, Muslims, Orthodox Jewish folks, people who just got off the plane from Israel visiting, Russians, and nudists and conservatives and drug users, gun owners, and people who don't like drug users very much at all. It's all there.
Right.
And but there definitely is a lot of drug use at PorcFest. No one's pretending otherwise, and that's what makes it special. I mean, it's not Burning Man where there's police all over the place. Police are not really allowed at PorcFest, with rare exceptions.
Yeah, right. I'm sure. Yeah. I heard at PorcFest there were people walking around nude with guns.
Yeah, there's definitely nudists. It's the whole shebang. The only real rule people are supposed to have to follow is you just don't start fights. You just don't commit any acts of aggression, and everything else is supposed to be go. Obviously, management, has sometimes been forced to, impose some rules, or sometimes management wants to impose rules. But in practice, it's a libertarian festival, but there's a libertine element to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So to circle back, Dave, I'm sorry, I was distracted by Scott Robinson's question. So where is the new Ridley Report going to be?
BitChute. Yeah.
BitChute. Yes.
You'll be able to just follow the new videos by going to ridleyreport.com.
Yes.
You'll see when you go there how long it's been. Now, right now, ridleyreport.com redirects to Odyssey, but I think I'm going to redirect it to my BitChute channel.
Yes.
Just because it gets more hits. And,
I agree.
So, the idea is just I'll be going to government meetings and asking the hardest questions I can think of. Not inside the meeting, but as people walk in and bureaucrats and so forth. And I just try to do what I can to bring some accountability to these unaccountable institutions.
Mm-hmm. And when does that start? Your BitChute account?
The BitChute account is up and running. If you go to BitChute and just type Ridley Report, you'll find videos there.
Excellent. Okay.
That were shot earlier.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I use BitChute. I upload content to it. It's very easy, very user friendly, and there are definitely. I mean, I don't know how accurate the numbers are, but you can definitely get a lot of views on BitChute. So I think that's a very smart move, and they don't censor anything. You won't have any problems.
Now, yeah, eventually they'll come for BitChute too. I mean, look what they did to Gab. Look what they did to other platforms like Library in Manchester, where they just shut them all the way down.
Yeah. Well,
or they shut the company all the way down.
Right. All right. Well, Dave, congratulations on that. Anything to add?
If you want to know more, you can go to forum.shiresociety.com. And I posted just a detailed post there that has as what's going to happen. And if you want to buy an ad, you can go there to forum.chiresociety.com.
All right, very good. All right. Well, thank you for the call, Dave, and congratulations. And I'm glad you have revived the Ridley Report.
Well, we'll see what we can do. Got to do something. Got to do something. Can't let them have their way on everything.
There you go. There you go. All right, Dave. Thank you for the call, my friend. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
All right, you got it. Bye-bye. All right, that was Dave Ridley of the Ridley Report, now on BitChute. And yes, I am a fan of that platform. It's like I said, you can put content on there. It's very easy. They don't give you a hard time about anything, unlike YouTube. Tom Blanchard says, come on, let's talk about Trump. Oh, absolutely. We're going to. Mike from Queen City Cabinetry says, when he says they're coming for us, does he mean the aliens? Oh, I don't see. I can't ask him, Mike, because he's not on the line anymore. But we do have virtual Dave Ridley has joined us, so we can ask him. Are you talking? Was real Dave Ridley talking about the aliens?
No idea.
Okay, so he doesn't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone's going to get that or like it.
Right. Well, we don't.
No. Okay, I'm done. I gotta go.
All right. Virtual Dave Ridley is also leaving us. But if you'd like to call us, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. The studio line is open, and
No one seems to be very excited.
Well, we'll just. I thought you were leaving, Virtual Dave Ridley. Okay. Let's see. Yes. So if you don't know, there was some big news, and I guess my Trump fatigue syndrome has ended because we do have to talk about this. But we'll grab this call. We do have a call. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
John C. Hopwood, and the C's for flying saucer. I know there's a C in there somewhere.
Whatever.
Oh, the C is for flying saucer. There's a C in there somewhere, yes. What's up, John?
Who's mocking UAPs and extraterrestrials?
Well, Mike from Queen City Cabinetry.
I want names.
Yes, Mike from Queen City Cabinetry. He was just asking, are the aliens coming for us?
Oh, well, if putting it that way, it could just be an innocent question. He might be thinking, I was just doing a thing about Manchester's self-styled Messiah, which, we can't talk about on your program because you always try to stay within the boundaries of good taste.
Not really.
Shut up, Virtual Dave.
Hello?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do try to stay within the bounds of good taste. Yes.
I just don't think people should be mocking extraterrestrials, particularly in light of that some of the presidential candidates could be either hybrids or just 200 proof, from Arcturus or someplace.
Right.
I'm here.
Just amazing, though, that they're allegedly amongst us, and instead of lifting us up, we seem to have dumbed them down.
Oh, well, that's terrible to hear. So, by the way, did you see Chris Christie has pulled ahead of Ron DeSantis in the polling here in New Hampshire? I believe our friend Eric Pilcher will be very excited.
I might have a paroxysm. How do you pronounce the word? Praroxym of belly laughter.
Oh my goodness!
In homage to the Jackie Gleason of presidential politics.
Yeah, I mean, he's still, he still has no chance, of course. Any thoughts on the indictments coming out of Georgia? Georgia?
Geez, I just don't want to think about politics. I'm still where you are last week.
Well, I've snapped out of it. I've come through it. The events of yesterday have forced me to do so. Plus I had the weekend to kind of, get my fever down, my Trump fatigue syndrome. But I'm sure it will be back. I'm sure it will be something that will likely be with me for a long time. But, it's probably something I'll just have to manage, try to control, but I'll have an occasional flare up. You know what I mean? It's all about suppression.
I mean, it's like, I don't want to hear about the war in Ukraine because it actually is triggering. And it gives me nightmares. But, everybody people talk about it. And it's a thing in the news.
That's right.
For 2 nights, I've been having nightmares. It's something you don't want to think about. But Pork Fest, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. addressed Pork Fest, and the head of the New Hampshire Democratic Party, Ray Buckley, who I've locked horns with too, but you know that's politics, right? Friendly with him now. He told him that he shouldn't go and speak to Pork Fest, and I thought of that as a betrayal because some of those people are my sworn enemies. We're talking, you know, not as Dave says, it's a diverse crowd, but there's some really obnoxious people there. Unlike somebody like me, who's a perfect gentleman. I'm like pouring oil. Is it on troubled waters, or probably you're thinking gasoline? But now I know why. I went to watch the Pork Fest introduction. Him speaking, and the person who introduced him is, like I mentioned, that the right wing congressman's wife.
Oh, the wife of.
We can talk about this another time because you've got to get on to the Trump stuff. But she's there introducing at Pork Fest.
Yeah.
I don't know about her, but I know her husband, who was a 9-term congressman in Orange County, California, which is where the John Birch Society was from, and was on the long list to be Trump's Secretary of State. He was marching to protest the stolen election on January 6th. So this is who Bobby Kennedy Jr. picks to be his New Hampshire coordinator. She lives in Kittery, Maine. And, I'm dealing with that because, like Tom Maskell and other people I know, because of his like 1970s anti-corporate message, we're looking to him like he's a second coming of Bernie Sanders. Right? So,
Ray Buckley.
All right, I have RFK derangement syndrome today.
I understand.
Well, you already had figured it out well before I did.
That's right.
Okay, take care, Matt.
All right, John. Thanks for the call. Bye-bye. All right. Well,
like even saying something like that, you could, if you were like a national talk show host and you said something like that, you could have your show yanked off the air, or there could be protests at your offices or something over something like that.
Oh, virtual Dave Ridley, you worry too much. 603-250-6007. The studio line is open and available for you. 603-250-6007. If you would like to chime in. Mike from Queen City Cabinetry said, I bet Georgia's on Trump's mind. I would assume so. In the short term, it's all good news for Trump in that, again, in the short term, because it will help him to win the nomination. He's apparently doing a big press conference on Monday, some sort of presentation on Monday. Trump is, where I assume he'll say horrible things about Jack Smith and Fonnie Willis and all that. And he's supposed to make his case for how the Georgia election was in fact stolen from him, 2 recounts and all of that. But he'll still say whatever he's going to say, and maybe he'll say horrible things about Ruby Freeman again, try to ruin her life, who knows. But yes, yesterday, last night, Jenny and I were watching the indictments. There was which were handed up. Apparently, convictions are handed down, or sentences are handed down. Indictments are handed up. That's something new that we learned yesterday. But we do have something here. This is from thehill.com. 5 takeaways from Trump's Georgia indictment. So this will kind of get us caught up. Former President Trump was charged alongside 18 co-defendants. One of them, by the way, who turns out to be his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in a sweeping indictment touching on nearly every aspect of his effort to reverse his 2020 election loss in Georgia. The 98-page indictment outlines Trump's pressure campaign against numerous Georgia officials, a plot to submit false slates of electors, and a lawsuit with faulty claims affirmed by Trump that sought to overturn the results in the state. And it devotes substantial time to lies about the election from Trump and his allies, whether about voter fraud in the state or those that unleashed a wave of threats against a Georgia election worker they accused of mishandling ballots. And that's, of course, Ruby Freeman, the woman whose life they ruined based on zero evidence. The indictment caps a more than 2-year investigation by Fulton County Attorney Fannie Willis, who gave the defendants until noon on August 25 to voluntarily surrender in Georgia. She said late last night after the charges were filed, quote, "I make decisions in this office based on the facts and the law. The law is completely nonpartisan," unquote. The substantial charges for Trump are matched by a lengthy list of those indicted alongside him. Nearly every member, and by the way, they're all going to be tried together, apparently, but some of them will, of course, flip, or there will be some degree of cooperation, I'm sure. I'm sure all 18 of these folks don't want to go down with Trump, particularly Mark Meadows, because Mark Meadows, and there was some surprise that he was included in this indictment, because Mark Meadows has not been included in any federal indictments. And there's a belief, there's a theory, and in fact, Chris Christie, who we were discussing earlier, has been saying that Mark Meadows, while he doesn't know this for sure, can't be certain, but Mark Meadows looks like a cooperating witness. So nearly every member of Trump's legal team is listed in the indictment. Oh, and that's another really fascinating aspect of this. Someone pointed out they've never seen so many attorneys on an indictment together. Nearly every member of Trump's legal team is listed in the indictment, with Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Kenneth Chesebro, Jenna Ellis, and Sidney Powell all facing charges as a result of the probe. Jeffrey Clark, a former DOJ lawyer Trump mauled installing as Attorney General, is also listed in the indictment. Chesebro, who drafted the memo hatching the fake elector plot, was charged alongside just 3 of those who served as alternate electors, Sean Still, David Schaefer, and Kathy Latham. While 16 Georgians participated in the scheme, many have since received immunity deals in the investigation. And in a departure from the federal election interference case, Willis also brings charges against former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who, alongside Trump, is charged with soliciting Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to reverse the election results by suggesting he, quote, find enough votes for Trump to carry a state Joe Biden won. And by the way, if you've never heard it, I suggest you listen to the call. I mean, everyone's heard bits and pieces of it. You know, it was a perfect call, but actually, no, it was a shakedown. I mean, if you believe that call was anything other than a shakedown, you're deluding yourself. But you can actually listen to the entire thing, not just the part where Trump talks about, I just need you to find 11,000 votes. You can hear the whole thing. It's pretty fascinating. I think it's about 30 minutes. It's on YouTube. Charges were also filed against Trump campaign staffers and those who sought to pressure election worker Ruby Freeman after Giuliani claimed she had improperly handled ballots. Trump called her a vote hustler or something. Again, based on zero evidence. The indictment also targets those involved in the breach on an elections office in Coffee County, including Missy Hampton, Coffee County's election supervisor, who sent a written invitation to Trump's legal team after posting a viral video claiming Dominion voting system machines could be manipulated. The heart of the indictment is labeling Trump's efforts in the state as a criminal enterprise, a designation that allows for the use of the state's racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations law, also commonly referred to as RICO. And by the way, so Georgia has their own version of that. You know, we always hear about federal RICO laws. This is Georgia's own version of RICO. The indictment lists 161 acts that form the basis for the RICO charges, a point-by-point recounting of nearly every act and lie Trump and his associates made in the course of trying to overturn the election. Use of the law also allows Willis to sweep in crimes that occurred outside her jurisdiction, like the effort to breach Coffee County election systems and the charges for Clark, who advocated for the Justice Department to send a letter to the state asking that it hold off on certifying President Biden's victory in Georgia while DOJ investigated Trump's baseless claims of election fraud. Like the federal indictment brought earlier this month, Willis focuses on the fraudulent claims made by Trump and his team. But where special counsel Jack Smith condenses the behavior into one fraud charge, Willis's indictment brings charges under crimes that bar forgery, making false statements, and filing false documents. The Fulton County indictment also alleges specific violations of Georgia election law. The indictment spends considerable energy on lies spread by Giuliani that turned the life of Georgia election worker Ruby Freeman upside down. And we talked about that on the show recently, too, by the way. Giuliani is no longer claiming that what he said was true. I forget exactly how it was worded, but he's no longer contesting that, or no longer claiming that there was any validity to that, effectively acknowledging that he lied, just made it up. Giuliani shared a video of Freeman working alongside her daughter, Shay Moss, whose life was also wrecked by this, during ballot counting at the State Farm Arena, later saying that the two were, quote, passing around USB ports as if they're vials of heroin or cocaine, unquote. Freeman was actually handing her daughter a mint. Trump would go on to call Freeman a, quote, professional vote scammer, unquote. Those lies fueled the total disruption of the lives of both women and are also the basis of a civil defamation suit brought by the women. Moss would go on to testify before the House Committee investigation on the Jan 6 attack, tearfully recounting how she feared for her life and she and her mother were advised by law enforcement not to return to their homes out of fear for their safety. The two black women also faced a series of racist threats after being thrown into the spotlight. Moss said at the hearing, quote, a lot of threats wishing death upon me, telling me I'll be in jail with my mother, and saying things like, be glad it's 2020 and not 1920, unquote. Other Trump campaign allies like Harrison Floyd and Trevian Cuddy were also charged, accused of pressuring others to make false statements about election operations on Election Day 2020. It was clear Trump had lost the 2020 election by mid-November, and by January 2021, Biden had assumed office. But Willis's indictment alleges a conspiracy spanning from November 4, 2020, the day after the election, to September 2022, nearly 2 years down the line. The last charges against Trump point to a September 17, 2021 letter to Raffensperger asking that he begin decertifying the state's election results well after the inauguration. Wow. Boy, talk about not letting something go, huh? The move nods to the length of Trump's effort in the state and an argument he has made on other cases that he should be immune for actions taken during his presidency. That's almost comical, like after the inauguration, sending Raffensperger that letter. Maybe it had actually gone out earlier and it got lost in the mail. I don't know. That's just wild. I do remember that, though. I remember that being reported in the media. It's like, what? He's still trying? Oh, my God. Lawyer Robert Cheeley and Kathy Latham, a retired teacher who served as the chairwoman of the Coffee County Republican Party, were each charged with perjury for, quote, knowingly, willfully, and unlawfully, unquote, making at least one false statement about their involvement in the alleged plot. Prosecutors say Latham lied under oath during a deposition for a different legal matter involving Raffensperger about her role in a breach of election equipment at the Coffee County Board of Elections and Registration Office. Cheeley allegedly perjured himself before the Fulton County Special Purpose Grand Jury. Let's see. It's long been suspected that details like Trump's call to Raffensperger and his lawyers' fake electors scheme would play a central role in a Georgia indictment. Details that have played a key role in Smith's federal investigation of the 2020 election aftermath as well. However, Willis's indictment ultimately weaved in lesser-known local efforts that allegedly advanced the broader conspiracy. The indictment details Trump lawyers' efforts to persuade state lawmakers of the former president's false election fraud claims, plus his allies' alleged efforts to pressure Freeman, the election worker. Prosecutors also tie an election equipment breach in Coffee County to Powell, one of the former president's most front-facing surrogates for his election fraud claims. The result of Willis's wide-reaching narrative is the most comprehensive indictment to date, detailing Trump and his allies' efforts to stop the 2020 election results from going into effect. So that kind of gets us caught up on what's in the indictment. Now, Mediaite has a story about Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. And by the way, both Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger were able to win re-election. So Trump was not able to damage them politically in Georgia, even though both of them, stood stoic all along, all through this, never caved into Trump. But they were able to withstand that. Tom Blanchard says a narcissistic person will not take no for an answer. That is true. This just popped up on Mediaite a little bit ago. Governor Brian Kemp absolutely obliterates Trump's plan to present, quote, irrefutable report on voter fraud in a scorching statement. So let's see, and I've not pre-read this, but we'll see what Brian Kemp, again, the Republican governor of Georgia, who has stood firm against Trump and has politically actually thrived. I mean, I think he's pretty popular there. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp buried Donald Trump over his countless claims about the election in his state that the former president has never been able to prove in court. On Tuesday morning, Trump announced on Truth Social, so that was this morning, that he will hold a press conference next week where he will produce a, quote, large, complex, detailed, but irrefutable report is in all caps, that's why I said it that way, report on the presidential election fraud which took place in Georgia, unquote. This sensationalistic claim follows 13-count indictment from Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, or I'm not sure if it's Fani or Fanny, I heard it pronounced both ways, who charged Trump and 18 co-defendants. Okay, we know that. Skipping down. Kemp was clearly not convinced of Trump's claims. In a statement posted to X, formerly known as Twitter, hard to get used to that, the platform, it says it even right here in the article, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Oh, God, how many years are we going to be referring to it that way? X. How long is it going to be before we can just say X and people know what we're talking about? For years, we're going to be saying X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Oh, hello to Slim Volume, by the way, who joins us in the Facebook live chat. So the governor flatly declared on X, quote, the 2020 election in Georgia was not stolen. For nearly 3 years now, anyone with evidence of fraud has failed to come forward under oath and prove anything in a court of law. Our elections in Georgia are secure, accessible, and fair, and will continue to be as long as I am governor. The future of our country is at stake in 2024, and that must be our focus, unquote. Kemp's remark follows the statement Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger released, which clearly zinged the former president over his mounting legal troubles. Both officials have come under attack by Trump ever since the election because they refused to back his election lies. Kemp has said that he would support Trump if he wins the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, and even though Trump remains the leading candidate in the polls, Kemp has urged the GOP to move away from the ex-president. So that was Governor Brian Kemp's response. How much time do we have? Well, if you'd like to get in with a call, the studio line is open, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. TheHill.com also has another article here, the 12 Trump tweets listed in the Georgia indictment. This might be interesting. By the way, even though it's no longer Twitter, now it's called X, we're still calling them tweets. So you still tweet on X. I know, it's confusing. Maybe Elon Musk will just change it back. Exchange it back, Elon. Okay. It says here, Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fonnie Willis noted 12 of the former President Trump's tweets as part of her case charging Trump for his efforts to remain in power following the election. The indictment lists more than 150 alleged acts that the prosecutors say all contributed to a conspiracy to overturn the election. Here's a look at the tweets that are now part of Willis's prosecution. Okay, there's tweets about the Georgia legislature hearings. In 5 of the posts included in the charging documents, Trump referenced hearings held by committees of Georgia state legislature at which Trump's allies promoted unfounded claims of mass election fraud to convince them to overturn the results. Several Trump attorneys who testified before state lawmakers now face charges of making false statements or soliciting a public officer to violate their oath, including Rudy Giuliani, Ray Smith, and John Eastman. Trump himself did not travel to any of the hearings, but he repeatedly posted them on Twitter, the platform now known as X, as they were taking place. One tweet read, as a December 3rd, 2020 hearing, the first of the 3 kicked off, Georgia hearings now on @OANN. Amazing. Of course, One America News Network, OANN. Is that still a thing, by the way? Does that still exist? I never hear about it anymore. Did that go away? I know they were having a problem getting their contract renewed with cable companies. Or something happened. But Trump promoted false fraud claims discussed at the hearing about an hour later, tweeting, wow, blockbuster testimony taking place right now in Georgia. Ballot stuffing by Dems when Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more coming, but this alone needs to be an easy win of the state. The indictment also lists, God, I wish I could do a good Trump impression. I'm sorry, guys. That'd be much more fun. But anyway, the indictment also lists 3 tweets issued on Trump's account during a December 30th, 2020, Georgia Senate Judiciary Subcommittee hearing about the election. Trump wrote just after 9 a.m. on that day, quote, hearings from Atlanta on the Georgia election overturn now being broadcast. Check it out at OANN, at Newsmax, and many more. At Brian Kemp, Georgia, should resign from office. He is an obstructionist who refuses to admit that we won Georgia. Big. Also won the other swing states, unquote. Swing states is capitalized, by the way, because if you haven't noticed, Trump just capitalizes random words. Don't know why. I won't say it. About an hour later, Trump again encouraged people to tune in, tweeting a link to a live stream of the hearing and writing, quote, hearings from Atlanta on the Georgia election overturn now being broadcast live via at RSB Network, ! Unquote. At 6 p.m. after the hearing concluded, Trump tweeted again promoting his false claims of mass election fraud. He said, quote, we now have far more votes than needed to flip Georgia in the presidential race. Massive voter fraud, it's in all caps, took place. Thank you to the Georgia legislature for today's revealing meeting, unquote. Tweets pressuring top state officials. Let's see here. 4 of the tweets outlined in the indictment relate to Trump's pressure campaign on Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, both of whom refused to declare Trump the winner of the Peach State. Trump claimed in a December 3rd tweet, quote, people in Georgia got caught cold, bringing in massive numbers of ballots and putting them in voting machines. Great job at Brian Kemp, GA. By the way, Trump tweeted that with no evidence, of course. 3 days later, Kemp and Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan issued another individual who has stood firm and stoic and did not bend to the pressure, issued a joint statement saying it would be unconstitutional for state lawmakers to name pro-Trump electors in light of Joe Biden's victory in the state. Trump tweeted that evening, quote, gee, what a surprise. Has anyone informed the so-called, says he has no power to do anything, governor at Brian Kemp, GA, and his puppet, Lieutenant Governor at Jeff Duncan, GA, that they could easily solve this mess and win signature verification and call a special session so easy, unquote. That's a problem. They actually probably could have. They just didn't realize it would be so easy. It's so easy, so easy. Trump similarly called for a special session December 14, the day that 16 pro-Trump individuals allegedly met in the state capitol and signed documents purporting to be Georgia's valid electors. By the way, if you don't know, they were not. They were lying. That is fraud. Just so we're all clear. Trump wrote or tweeted, quote, "What a fool Governor at Brian Kemp GA of Georgia is. Could have been so easy, but now we have to do it the hard way. Demand this clown call a special session and open up signature verification now. Otherwise, could be a bad day for two great senators on January 5th, unquote." What does that mean? And Willis cited a tweet Trump said after his infamous January 2nd, 2021 call with Raffensperger when he asked the Secretary of State to help find 11,780 votes. Trump tweeted the next day, quote, "I spoke to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger yesterday about Fulton County and voter fraud in Georgia. He was unwilling or unable to answer questions such as the ballots under table scam, ballot destruction, out-of-state voters, dead voters, and more. He has no clue," unquote. Well, again, if you just make up a bunch of stuff and then ask somebody about it, they're not going to have much of a clue. The final three Trump tweets listed in the indictment revolve around Trump's pressure campaign against his vice president, Mike Pence, another person who stood firm. Give him credit for that. I have a lot of criticisms of Mike Pence, but I give him credit for that. In the lead up to the Jan 6 Capitol riot, the 98-page indictment at length discusses Trump and his inner circle's alleged scheme to overturn the election results by submitting false slates of electors and leveraging Pence in his role presiding over the counting of the Electoral College votes as president of the Senate. Trump claimed in a Jan 5 tweet, quote, "The vice president has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors," unquote. Well, now that particular tweet is a bit ironic, is it not? Because, yeah, that's what Pence did. He did reject the fraudulently chosen electors and went with the legal electors, as he is constitutionally obligated to do. So Trump actually got that one right. Yes, the vice president has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors. You know what they say about a blind dog. Let's see. The indictment also lists two tweets on Jan 6 itself in the early morning hours. Trump wrote, quote, "If Vice President at Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in the process not approved by their state legislatures, which it must be. Mike can send it back," unquote. Just after 8 a.m., when the former president's supporters were gathering on the ellipse for a rally at which Trump and multiple other defendants in the indictment spoke, Trump tweeted again, quote, "States want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on..." It's amazing that someone can just lie so easily. Like, it just flows out of him. Sorry. It is astonishing when you really think about it. Then, of course, there's millions of people who can't see it and who just don't realize that's what he's doing. That's even more astonishing. Quote, "States want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process, never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage," unquote. So there you go. So those are the tweets that are featured in the indictment. Let's see. Well, we have a few minutes left. If anyone wants to get in with a quick call, you can. The studio line is open, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. There is, by the way, so there are recently, John Hopwood says, can we talk about Dusty Russell? I have no idea who that is. Miriam Banish says he lies blatantly in public and expects everyone to just go along. Well, that's the thing. People do go along. That's part of the problem. Oh, our friend Ron is on the line. Hi, Ron.
Hey, real fast, Matt.
Yes.
Great show. This is the kind of show that I like. I could sit there and listen to this stuff all day. So hopefully, if you don't have things planned for tomorrow, we can go part 2 on this.
Yeah, well, tomorrow, of course, we'll be joined in the first hour by Eric Pilcher, my favorite conservative, and we're going to talk about many things, no doubt, but I'm sure this will be one of them.
All right, you got my attention. See you later, bud.
Excellent. Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. Bye-bye. All right, always nice to hear from our friend Ron. And if you'd like to get in with a quick call, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. Vox has a story up. The constitutional case that Donald Trump is already banned from being president. 2 conservative legal scholars have made a strong 14th Amendment argument, but the politics of their theory are very, very dicey. Let's look at, we'll look at a little bit of this just briefly, and then we'll have to pick up the rest of it later. But again, these are a couple of conservative, and actually I think a third conservative scholar has come out. So, anyone who wants to say, oh, it's just the left is saying Trump can't be president. These are conservative scholars who actually care about the Constitution making this case. Whether you buy it or not, let's just be clear on where this is coming from. It says here, 2 conservative legal scholars, members of the Federalist Society in good standing, have just published an audacious argument that Donald Trump is constitutionally prohibited from running for president, and that state election officials have not only the authority but the legal obligation to prevent his name from appearing on the ballot. The legal paper, authored by University of Chicago professor William Baude and the University of St. Thomas professor Michael Stokes Paulson, centers on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, a provision that limits people from returning to public office if they have since, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion or given aid or comfort, unquote, to those who have. Baude and Paulson argue that this clearly covers Trump's behavior between November 2020 and January 2021. Now, let's just, again, we're running out of time, but just quickly, and we'll come back to this on another day, tomorrow if we can get to it. Engaged in insurrection or rebellion. If you blame, just on a surface level, if you blame Trump for Jan 6, then you would accept the argument that he encouraged, which personally I do, that to happen, that he caused that to happen. Not just by, people talk about the speech on the ellipse. I would say more everything that led up to it by putting this in people's heads that the election was stolen, and then they believe him. And I do believe, by the way, some people will disagree with me. I believe the term insurrection, absolutely appropriate to use. Insurrection, the Webster's definition, is a violent uprising against a government or authority. So how that doesn't count as an insurrection, I don't know. Somebody can try to explain it to me, but that's an insurrection as far as I'm concerned. As far as the given aid or comfort, well, when Trump made that video, remember, what was it, 2.5 hours in, Trump finally got in front of a camera and made a video telling everybody to go home? But what did he also say in the video? He said, I love you. You're very special. I completely understand why you're upset. You have a right to be upset. There was a lot of comfort, I think, given in that video. I need you to go home, but I'm with you. I love you. I agree with you. And of course, since then, now he talks about how he's going to, if he's elected president, he's going to start pardoning the rioters and so forth. The legal paper authored by University of Chicago professor. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I read that already. Okay. Baude and Paulson write, and then we'll have to stop on this in the paper. quote, the most politically explosive application of Section 3 to the events of January 6th is at the same time the most straightforward. Former President Donald J. Trump is constitutionally disqualified from again being president or holding any other covered office because of his role in the attempted overthrow of the 2020 election and the events leading up to the January 6th attack, unquote. They also write, no official should shrink from these. Let me back up a little bit. So the consequences of this argument are astonishing. On Bod and Paulson's read, Section 3 is self-executing, meaning it does not require an act of Congress to enter force and binds those public officials in the position to act on its dictates. Basically, if a single official anywhere in the U.S. electoral system finds their constitutional analysis compelling, Bod and Paulson urge them to act upon it. They write, quote, no official should shrink from these duties. It would be wrong, indeed, arguably itself a breach of one's constitutional oath of office, to abandon one's responsibilities of faithful interpretation, application, and enforcement of Section 3, unquote. And by the way, if you violated your oath of office, that should be a disqualifier, on you if you, well, what I'm getting at is, and again, we're running out of time, but the president swears an oath to defend the Constitution, defend the country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I've always made the argument that if our nation's capital is under attack, and again, it wasn't a foreign attack, it was a domestic attack, but if our nation's capital is under attack, and let's say, for example, you decide to sit in your dining room off of the Oval Office and watch it on television for 2.5 hours before doing something to stop it, at one point even encouraging it by, after the Capitol had already been breached, tweeting something negative about Mike Pence, who was in direct danger. That seems like a violation of an oath of office, does it not? I mean, if you swear, if you take an oath to protect your country, which would include your capital from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and then when the capital is under attack, you choose to do nothing for 2.5 hours. That's you've violated your oath. All right. On that note, we have to go. Eric Pilcher will be with us tomorrow. And thank you again to Bob Hennelly for joining us in the first hour today, and everyone who called, everybody in the Facebook live chat. We got to go. There was somebody else who was trying to call earlier, but they didn't get through. And they give up too easily. But he might like this song. So we'll end with this. We won't get to hear the whole thing, but a little bit of Jerry and the Scumbags. I'm the man. I do love this song. And if you missed any part of today's show, it will be up in just a little bit at WMNHradio.org and my website, MattConnarton.com. All right, I got to go. We're out of here. I'll talk to y'all a little bit later. Bye, everybody.
I'm really cool. Very handsome too.